Okay, I'm keen to kind of bring all of this together for the listener in this specific context of changing eating habits. So I have an avatar that I want to kind of workshop with you.
Okay.
So let's pretend that you have a gentleman that comes in to see you. His name is Chris, and his goal is to lose 15 kilograms. He's been to see his physician. Maybe he has pre-diabetes. They've told him, you need to lose some weight. He tends to eat what he would describe as a fairly healthy diet. Most nights he'll have a couple of glasses of wine with dinner, and often after dinner he finds himself kind of binge eating on sweet foods while he's watching TV before bed. And these are two habits in particular: the drinking a couple of glasses of wine each night and then having some sweet food before dinner that he would like to let go of.
Mm-hmm.
He's tried before, and his approach before has been abstinence, and just not buying these foods, or saying, as of tomorrow, I'm no longer going to drink wine, I'm no longer going to have dessert, and also calorie tracking.
Mm-hmm.
And these have kind of served him or helped him in the short term, but ultimately have failed, and he's gone back to his old habits.
Okay.
So my first question here is, why doesn't something like calorie tracking work, at least in the long term?
Yeah.
Because if from a mathematical sense, from a control sense, on paper, it seems like something that should result in weight loss and then weight maintenance.
Yeah. So starting with that, I would say for the Vulcans in the audience, calorie tracking would work extremely well. For the people that can be hyperlogical and just need to know how many calories they've taken in and how many they need to put out. Actually, I have a friend who did it just by the book job of losing post-pregnancy weight by calculating how many calories she needed to eat or not eat, and she lost the weight in 6 weeks or whatever she had planned, and it all went perfectly because she can just be like, yep, I'm not doing that. And so the tracking can be really helpful for people that are those hyperlogical, and I would say the reward value there is in following the logical plan. Like it's not just that you're just going to stop doing things. There's something very rewarding about being able to follow a plan.
Is that a genetic difference?
I'm sure there are genetics involved. I mean, genetics are involved in everything. So it doesn't really mean much, but for some people, they've kind of hit that genetic lottery, and they're really good. It just seems to come as a natural thing to them. So I'm not, and some people just need to become aware of how many calories they eat. I've had a number of folks who are shocked when they just add up all the calories that they've eaten in a day. Like, what? They had no idea.
And that awareness can help them assign a new reward value.
Yeah. Yeah. So that in itself, kind of leans into the awareness category where they've been unaware in the past. So this isn't to say that calorie counting doesn't work for anyone. It's to say, in the rarefied cases for the Vulcans out there, that would be what I would give them, and they wouldn't need anything else. For the rest of us, it can help develop awareness. For example, if we're just not aware of how many calories we're putting away, but beyond that, using that as the stick, it doesn't work so well.
So where would someone like Chris begin, who has tried calorie tracking? He tried complete elimination. Yeah. Both of these things worked in the short term, but ultimately failed.
Yeah, I would split the alcohol and the snacking into separate categories. And I start with the alcohol because the alcohol can often, make it harder to rely on that prefrontal cortex or just to remember things. And so it can also be associated with other, kind of that enabler of other cravings. So we might crave sweet things, after we've had a couple of glasses of wine or a couple of drinks.
So alcohol contributes to the prefrontal cortex going offline.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, I would start asking questions like, what's the difference between when you have a couple of glasses of wine or a couple of drinks at night versus when you don't? And often people don't notice, for example, that it affects their sleep, or that it just makes it harder for them. You know, they feel a little not quite awake in the morning. It takes them a little longer to kind of become ungroggy. So there are a lot of negative consequences that even come from 1 or 2 glasses of wine that people don't even notice until they start to pay attention and then notice them. And then they're like, how did I not see that before? So that's an example of where, you know, I just like to go in and objectively take an inventory of what all the results of the behavior are. So for example, what's the reward that somebody gets from having a couple of drinks with dinner? You know, how, for a lot of people, alcohol, when they really pay attention, they're like, I could take it or leave it. It's not like the best tasting thing in the world, you know. And if you, for somebody that's really struggling, like hard alcohol, you have to mask the taste of that thing because it's burn. You know, it tastes like burning because it's our body saying, hey, this is not really good to consume, you know. So we can really pay attention and see what the process that we've learned to associate with the relaxation or the whatever that is there, that is kind of triggered and induced by the alcohol. How much of the process can we keep and let go of the alcohol? Just using a parallel example, my patients who want to quit smoking, I ask them, so what do you get from smoking? And they're like, well, I get a, you know, I relax. I'm like, well, cigarette, you know, nicotine's a stimulant. So where's the relaxation in the smoking? It's like, well, I get to go out on a smoke break. Oh, well, what if you went out on a non-smoke break? And they go out on that non-smoke break and they start to realize, okay, they like the socialization with the, you know, other people, or just to you know, get up and walk around, you know, for 15 minutes as compared to sitting at their desk all day. And so they can learn to actually get that break without the smoking. And they can learn to capitalize on the rewards that they're getting from that behavior and let go of the unhelpful behaviors. We can do the same thing with alcohol. So for example, you know, if it's getting to relax before dinner, or, you know, having something tasty with dinner, there are lots of drinks that are non-alcoholic that taste good. Whether it's, you know, flavored seltzer water, or some people like kombucha, or, you know, there are lots of things that can provide that, you know, that palate pleasing taste, whether it's before dinner, with dinner, after dinner, whatever, that aren't alcoholic. And they don't have the negative consequences that come with the actual 2 carbon fragments that come with that. So, you know, that's one thing that I would split out to start with.
Do people have more success with breaking a destructive habit if they're replacing it with another habit? So like the example there that you used with, so let's say someone's drinking to feel relaxed. Mm-hmm. So step 1, they cultivate awareness, they're mindful, and they realize, oh, hang on, I don't actually enjoy the taste of alcohol, but it's making me feel relaxed. Mm-hmm. Are they going to have more success in breaking that habit by replacing it with another habit that helps them achieve relaxation?
So that can often be an intermediate step. And I say that because the ultimate solution is learning how to relax without needing anything external, because that is something that we can always rely on. If we have some type of substitution, then we just learn to rely on that. And if we're not targeting the underlying mechanisms, the substitutions are always going to fail at some point, whether we don't have them or they're not providing the relaxation that we wanted. And then we get freaked out like, oh no, I'm not as relaxed. I need to do something else. This isn't working. I need more, or whatever. As compared to learning, oh, here are emotions. These are unpleasant. I can learn to be with them, right? That's always available. And that's something that the more we lean into it, the stronger it gets.
So does that also apply to something like breath work, for example? Mm-hmm. You said we need to learn how to relax.
Mm-hmm.
Is, adopting something like breath work, is that just another replacement?
It depends on what you mean by breath work.
Well, let's just say someone learns a type of breathing that helps them feel relaxed.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be seen as another type of replacement as compared to learning to be with their emotions. That's the ultimate, I don't want to say cure, but the ultimate way of working with our emotions is really learning to see them for what they are and feel them and be with them and not resist them. So breath work could be a way of distracting ourselves from those negative emotions.
Yeah, that's the distinction I was trying to get to. So ultimately, you need to experience those emotions. Mm-hmm. And it almost seemed like earlier you were labeling them. Oh, that's fear. That's anxiety.
Yes. So this is actually popularized by a well-known Burmese meditation teacher named Mahasi Sayadaw back sometime in the 1900s. And it's a practice that's commonly taught in certain Western, Vipassana or insight meditation circles, where they literally talk about noting your experience. So if there's thinking, you just note thinking. If there's seeing, you might note seeing, or you might note green, white, wood, color type of thing. If I'm just looking around, you'd note what you're hearing, if there's sounds and body sensations, tightness, tingling, burning, heat, expanding, contracting, those types of things. So the noting is really helpful for inducing what's described both in physics and psychology as the observer effect. And I think I read a little bit about this in the Hunger Habit as well, where by observing, we can't be simultaneously as identified with an emotion or a thought or a feel or a body sensation. So if we note them or label them, oh, that's thinking, that's different than I'm thinking this. And we're so identified that we're caught up in that story. Yeah, exactly. It gives us the distance, the perspective. Distance isn't the perfect word because we're not distancing ourselves from them, but at the same time, we're getting perspective and we're getting some distance from being identified with.
Chris was not only having difficulty giving up the wine every evening, but he was also finding himself binge eating after dinner. So just to get really practical here, what would that look like for him on a nightly basis at the beginning in terms of cultivating awareness? What is he kind of trying to pay attention to?
Yeah, I would start by having Chris pay attention to the results of the night snacking. So how do you feel afterwards? How was his sleep? All the results. And then, so he could really carefully catalog those. Then I would have him pay attention as he was night snacking to play with that pleasure plateau. What's the first bite like? What's the second bite like? Because for a lot of people, they just need a couple of bites of something sweet and then they're good. And that generally is not a problem, right? So I would have him pay attention to those, find that pleasure plateau, start playing with that. And then I would have him just explore what's it like not to eat after dinner. And I do this myself. A couple of years ago, I just started eating, it's like not eating anything. Like I used to have snacks at night, no big deal. But I just stopped eating after dinner. And I realized that I slept much better, especially if I ate an early dinner, so like eat at like 4 or 5 and then, not eat until, breakfast the next morning. And I would just get to sleep more easily, and sleep was, more continuous and better sleep metrics. And so I would have him pay attention to the benefits that come with, not night snacking, especially, and on top of that. So what I still notice after years of doing this is occasionally I'll have a craving to eat some food at night. And especially if I'm in bed and my brain's like, oh no, if you don't have a snack, you're not going to get to sleep. And I've learned to just like notice those sensations and they go away pretty quickly. It's that thought, that fear thought, there's a craving. And then within a minute or two, it's gone. And then I'm all good. And so I would have Chris and anybody else that wanted to play with this, just notice like, it's not that hard especially if we don't resist our cravings. So that saying what we resist persists, it's true.
Break that down.
Yeah.
Because that almost seems contrary to the idea of just saying I'm going to have dinner and not eat anymore after that. Like, so if someone is experiencing cravings after dinner,
Yeah.
is the best line of action to resist that and not eat something, or is it to eat a little bit of something?
I would start with like not putting any reels on it and just do what they normally do, so they could catalog what that baseline is. Then I would have them pay attention as they ate a little bit of something, explore that pleasure plateau, see how much they need to satisfy that urge, that itch. And then if they wanted to, I would have them explore using curiosity as a way to ride out a craving. And just, if they're not hungry, just not eat.
Is that what urge surfing is?
Yeah, it basically.
Right. Ride out that craving.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have the formal protocol that we've used in our studies, whether smoking or eating, is that we have people, it's called RAIN, the acronym. So R stands for recognize. So recognize that you have a craving coming on. A stands for allow or accept that it is there. So if we resist the craving, it's going to get stronger. The I stands for investigate. And that's where we get really curious. Instead of going, oh no, here's this craving, and fighting it or resisting it, we go, oh, what does this craving feel like? And the N stands for note. So we note the sensations as they come and go. It's like tightness, tension, burning. Here's a thought. Here's this. Here's this. And so we can, as that wave of a craving comes up, we can get on that wave. We can ride it until it goes away.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So we're not resisting the craving in that we are seeing it for what it is.
Yes. Yes.
That craving is there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that we have to reach into the freezer and grab the container of ice cream. That's, if we're quote unquote kind of depriving ourselves of ice cream, that's what I was thinking when you were saying resistance.
Yeah. Well, deprivation, it's funny that you say that, depriving ourselves of ice cream. What are we really depriving ourselves of? If we're having a craving for ice cream and we're not hungry, we're not actually depriving ourselves of anything calorically, because our body's got its needs met. So we can say we're depriving ourselves of indulging a craving. And this is where we can actually get into this territory of meeting our needs instead of feeding our wants. So we can say, oh, and I get this a lot, where people say, well, isn't that, aren't you not taking care of yourself if you're not, feeding those wants? And it's really about, that's not the right question. The question is asking ourselves, what do I need? So if we're lonely, if we've got some strong emotion, if we have something happening, food is not going to fix an emotion. It's just going to distract us momentarily and feed the habit of eating when we have a strong emotion. The true way of taking care of ourselves. So I think of this as the self-care as compared to self-indulgence. When we are truly asking the question of what do I need, we are caring for ourselves when we meet that need, as compared to scratching that itch of an urge when we want something.
Yeah, we really have to work with our psychology.
Yes.
To get out of this.
Yeah. And it's not some crazy sit on the couch 4 days a week for 40 years type of work with our psychology. It starts with just learning, oh, this is how our brains work. Oh, I can be with emotions and thoughts instead of having to do something about them, where that being becomes the new doing. It's not, I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's not that complicated.
Right. It sounds very intuitive to be in touch with your feelings, your emotions. What's happened?
Well, I think there's this attention economy that learned that it can get us to buy stuff to distract ourselves. by scratching those itches of an urge that says, ooh, that's unpleasant, make it go away. I'll make it go away for $19.95 a month, you know? And so the more that attention economy revs up and gets us to buy things, the more it is incentivized to keep us distracted. And the farther away we distance ourselves from ourselves.
Let's come back to Chris. Let's say that he comes back in to see you as a patient and he says, Doc, I've been employing some of these tools and it's been helping. But here and there, I'll have a slip up.
Mm-hmm.
And once I have a slip up, I just go for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I end up eating the entire tub of ice cream.
Yeah.
Is this something that you come across a bit?
It's so common that there's a scientific term for it. It's called the abstinence violation effect.
Okay.
My patients call it the F-its.
Yeah, F-it. You know, I've had 3 or 4 scoops. I may as well go the whole tub.
Yep. So whether you use the scientific or the common term, it doesn't matter. It's the same phenomenon, and it is very, very common. So here, what I say is, great, you slipped up. If someone is open to learning from that situation, they're actually better off than if they're not open to it. So, you know, often people think, oh, I took 2 steps backwards. And what I ask people is, do you learn more when you struggle than when you don't struggle? And typically the answer is yes, because that's, you know, in that struggle is the growth and the learning. So if somebody can be open to learning in that slip up, they can actually learn more about themselves and more about their brains and more about how to work with future slip ups than if they sit there and berate themselves and beat themselves up and say they've failed.